Welcome to our deep dive on global warming. We're looking at this report today called Global Warming, a pressing challenge for humanity. And it really digs deep into why this is such a big deal. And honestly, it's going to feel a lot closer to home than you might think.
You know, it is interesting how we tend to think of global warming as this kind of far-off problem, but this report really emphasizes that it's happening right now. And the evidence is just undeniable.
Yeah, for sure. So let's jump right into it. The report starts by breaking down the causes of global warming, and maybe surprisingly, it begins with something we all use, our cars.
Exactly. The biggest culprit here is really the burning of fossil fuels,
Sure.
gas for our cars, coal and oil for energy. It all adds up. The report actually states that the energy sector alone contributes a massive 73% of global greenhouse gas emissions.
Wow, 73%. That's a huge chunk. So it's not just our cars.
Yeah.
It's like everything from our daily commute
Yeah.
to our flights, even just turning on the lights. It all kind of contributes to this,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. But it goes beyond just our energy consumption. The report also points to deforestation as a major factor.
Right, deforestation. Can you explain why that's so impactful?
Well, think of forests as the Earth's lungs. They absorb carbon dioxide. When we clear them, though, for things like agriculture or urban development, we're essentially releasing all that stored CO2 right back into the atmosphere.
So we're basically undoing nature's own way of regulating the climate.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of agriculture, the report also mentions that our food choices play a role as well.
That's right. The livestock industry, particularly cattle farming, produces a significant amount of methane, which is a far more potent greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. And then there's the widespread use of fertilizers, which release nitrous oxide, another greenhouse gas.
So even what we eat contributes to global warming. It seems like everything is connected. Now, the report doesn't sugarcoat the consequences either. It states that the Earth has already heated up by 1.2 degrees Celsius since the late 1800s, with 2020 being one of the hottest years on record. What are the tangible effects of this temperature increase?
Well, for starters, we're seeing a pretty dramatic acceleration in the melting of polar ice caps and glaciers, directly leading to rising sea levels. Some projections estimate that entire coastal cities could be underwater if we don't take action.
Wow, that's a pretty frightening thought.
Mm.
The report also connects global warming to the increase in extreme weather events, right?
Exactly. We're experiencing more frequent and intense hurricanes, devastating wildfires, prolonged heat waves, and catastrophic floods. And these aren't just abstract concepts. They're causing real damage and disrupting lives around the world.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking to see the impact these events have on people and communities. The report also delves into something I wasn't as familiar with, ocean acidification. Can you explain what that is and why it matters?
Sure. As the ocean absorbs excess CO2 from the atmosphere, it becomes more acidic. This acidification is especially harmful to marine life, particularly coral reefs, which are essential for supporting entire ecosystems. It's like a domino effect. As the ocean becomes more acidic, it disrupts the delicate balance of marine life, impacting the entire food chain.
So it's not just the air we breathe that's affected. It's the very foundation of our oceans. But how can we be certain that all of this is directly linked to human activity? What evidence does the report offer to support these claims?
Well, the report is very thorough in presenting evidence. We have temperature records showing a clear upward trend over the past century, with the last 4 decades being the warmest on record. And it's not just temperature. Satellite images and on-the-ground observations show glaciers shrinking and Arctic ice melting at alarming rates. It's like watching the planet's icebox defrosting right in front of us.
That's a powerful image. And the report also mentions that coastal communities are already experiencing rising sea levels firsthand, with some areas seeing an 8-inch rise in the last century alone. Are there any other indicators in nature that point to a changing climate?
Absolutely. We're witnessing shifts in natural ecosystems. Animals are migrating earlier, plants are blooming out of season. These subtle but significant changes in nature's rhythms are a clear sign that the climate is in flux.
Yeah, it's almost like the planet is trying to tell us something. So we've covered the causes, the consequences, and the undeniable evidence. It's a lot to take in, and it can feel pretty overwhelming. Is there any hope? Does the report offer any potential solutions?
Well, there's always hope. And thankfully, the report dedicates a significant portion to outlining potential solutions. It's actually quite encouraging.
That's good to hear. So in part 2, we'll delve into those solutions and explore what we can do, both individually and collectively, to address this global challenge.
Welcome back to our deep dive on global warming. In part 1, we kind of unpacked the causes and consequences and the evidence of this really pressing issue. Now let's shift our focus to solutions and explore what we can do both individually and collectively to combat this global challenge.
Yeah, because it's easy to feel overwhelmed by the scale of the problem. But as we saw in the report, we're not powerless. There are concrete actions we can take, and every little bit helps.
Absolutely. The report highlights a range of solutions, and it emphasizes that it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. We need a multifaceted strategy that addresses both the supply and demand sides of the equation.
Okay, can you explain what you mean by supply and demand in this context?
When we talk about the supply side, we're referring to where our energy comes from. This is where the transition to renewable energy sources like solar, wind, and hydropower becomes crucial.
So it's about replacing those fossil fuels with cleaner alternatives that make sense. But what about the demand side?
Well, the demand side is all about how we use energy. This is where energy efficiency comes into play. By reducing our energy consumption, we automatically decrease the demand for fossil fuels.
So it's a two-pronged approach. Clean up the energy we use and use less of it overall. This seems like a pretty smart strategy. The report dives into some specific examples, right?
It does. For instance, imagine a world where buildings are designed to be energy efficient from the ground up, with better insulation, natural lighting, and smart systems that optimize energy usage. The report states that buildings account for almost 40% of global energy consumption. So even small improvements in this area can have a huge impact.
Wow, that's a significant chunk. It'd be amazing to see more buildings designed with sustainability in mind. What about transportation? That's another area where we use a lot of energy.
Yeah, transportation is a major source of emissions, and the report highlights the need for cleaner transportation systems. This includes transitioning to electric vehicles, expanding and improving public transportation networks, and encouraging walking and cycling as viable alternatives.
So it's about moving away from those gas guzzlers, embracing electric cars and public transportation, and maybe even dusting off those bicycles. What other solutions does the report suggest?
One solution that often gets overlooked is the power of nature. The report emphasizes the importance of reforestation and conservation efforts. Trees are natural carbon sinks, meaning they absorb CO2 from the atmosphere.
So planting trees is like investing in a giant natural air purifier. And it's not just about planting new trees, it's also about protecting our existing forests, right?
Exactly. Deforestation is a major contributor to global warming. The report highlights a study that found that deforestation is responsible for about 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions. So preserving our planet's forests is absolutely crucial.
It's amazing how interconnected all of this is. Our energy choices, our transportation systems, the way we design our cities, even the food we eat. It all plays a role in addressing climate change.
It really does. And while individual actions are important, the report stresses that we need systemic change to truly address this challenge. This is where government policies and international agreements come in.
Okay, let's talk about that. What kind of policies and agreements are we talking about?
One policy that's often discussed is carbon pricing. This could involve implementing carbon taxes or cap-and-trade systems, which put a price on carbon emissions and incentivize emissions reductions.
So basically making it more expensive to pollute, which would encourage companies and individuals to find cleaner alternatives. It seems like a logical approach.
It is, and on the international stage, agreements like the Paris Agreement are crucial for setting global targets and fostering collaboration among nations. The Paris Agreement aims to limit global warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius, preferably to 1.5 degrees Celsius compared to pre-industrial levels.
So it's going to take a global effort to solve a global problem, right? We need everyone working together.
Absolutely. We need all hands on deck to tackle this challenge effectively.
This is all incredibly important information, but it's also a lot to digest. What are some key takeaways that our listeners should keep in mind?
Well, the most important takeaway, I think, is that we are not powerless in the face of this challenge. There are solutions, and there is hope. Every action we take, no matter how small, can make a difference. Whether it's reducing our energy consumption, supporting policies that promote sustainability, or simply spreading awareness, we all have a role to play in creating a more sustainable future.
That's a message of empowerment I think we all need to hear. It's easy to get discouraged, but we can't let fear or despair paralyze us. We need to channel our energy into action and create a future where both people and the planet can thrive. We've covered the causes, the consequences, the evidence. We even explored some potential solutions to global warming. But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to kind of circle back to something that really struck me in the report, the human side of this issue.
You're talking about the ethical and social implications of climate change, right? It's a crucial dimension that often gets overshadowed by the scientific data and the technological solutions.
Exactly. The report really emphasizes this idea of climate justice, acknowledging the impacts of global warming aren't felt equally around the world.
It's a point that's often overlooked. The communities that contribute the least to greenhouse gas emissions are often the most vulnerable to the consequences of climate change. Think about low-lying island nations facing rising sea levels, or regions struggling with extreme droughts and food shortages.
Yeah, it's a heartbreaking paradox.
Yeah.
And it really highlights the need for solutions that are not only environmentally sound, but also socially just.
Absolutely. Climate justice needs to be a central consideration in every policy, every innovation, every action we take. It's about ensuring that vulnerable communities have the resources and support they need to adapt to the changing climate and build resilience.
And it's not just about addressing the immediate needs of those most affected. It's about recognizing the responsibility we have to future generations.
That's a powerful point. The decisions we make today will ripple through time, shaping the world our children and grandchildren will inherit. We have a moral obligation to act now, not only for our own well-being, but for the well-being of generations to come.
Yeah, it's a sobering thought, but also empowering. It means we have the power to change course, to create a legacy of a healthy and thriving planet. The report also stresses the importance of global cooperation in tackling this challenge.
Oh, absolutely. Global cooperation is essential. Climate change transcends national borders. It's a shared challenge that demands collective action. Agreements like the Paris Accord, where countries worldwide commit to reducing emissions and working collaboratively to find solutions, represent a crucial step in the right direction.
It's encouraging to see nations coming together to address this global threat, and really underscores the idea that we're all in this together. So as we wrap up this deep dive into global warming, what's the one message you hope our listeners take away?
Well, I hope listeners come away with a sense of urgency and a sense of agency. We're at a critical juncture, and the choices we make now will have far-reaching consequences. But we're not powerless. We each have a role to play in creating a more sustainable future, whether it's through the choices we make in our daily lives, advocating for change in our communities, or supporting organizations dedicated to climate action.
It's about moving beyond awareness to action, understanding that every effort, no matter how small, contributes to the collective solution.
Exactly. Global warming is a daunting challenge, but it's not insurmountable if we act now with determination and a shared commitment to a sustainable future. We can create a world where both humanity and the planet can thrive.
Well, this deep dive has been a journey. We've confronted some alarming realities, grappled with complex issues, and explored a range of solutions. But I think the most important takeaway is that we're not alone in this fight. We have each other. We have a growing global movement, and we have the power to make a difference. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into global warming. We hope you found it informative and empowering. Remember, the future is not something that happens to us. It's something we create.